They thought I would stay invisible forever. Vivienne Harper's voice echoed in her mind as she adjusted the sapphire silk of her gown, the fabric sliding over her like liquid midnight, catching the warm glow of the crystal chandeliers above. The St. Regis ballroom was alive with polished laughter, the soft hum of expensive perfume, and clinking glasses creating a symphony of society life. Every step she took across the marble floor was deliberate, a rhythm of confidence built from years of silent determination. Guests paused mid-conversation, eyes flicking toward her, whispers threading through the crowd like electricity. At the far end, Donovan, her ex-husband, was laughing with a group of executives, his tailored suit impeccable, his posture radiating effortless control, completely unaware that the world he had tried to dominate was about to shift. Vivienne's heels clicked softly on the polished floor as she moved, a slow, steady beat that drew attention without demanding it, her emerald necklace catching the light and the eyes of those around her. Memories of the past threatened to flicker, the betrayal, the cold dismissals, the empty promises that had left her life scattered in ruins, but she breathed through the recollection, letting it solidify her strength rather than weaken her. A delicate gust of air from the open doors carried the faint scent of lemon and old books from her apartment, grounding her, reminding her that she had rebuilt more than just a facade. She had constructed a life of her own making. Julian Montgomery, the billionaire whose empire she now had ties to, had trusted her intellect, her resilience, and her unshakable poise, and that trust had transformed into a quiet, formidable power. She could feel the tension ripple through the room as Lucas's gaze finally found her, a fraction of recognition, confusion, and something akin to fear flickering in his blue eyes. Her lips curved in a measured, knowing smile that suggested patience, strategy, and inevitability. The soft murmur of the crowd grew heavier, anticipation thick in the air, and Vivienne's heart kept a steady beat, not of anxiety, but of control. Each movement, each glance, each subtle tilt of her head communicated that she was no longer the woman who had once been underestimated, dismissed, and erased from the narrative of her own life. The orchestra in the corner swelled, the notes wrapping around her like a cloak, heightening the drama, every breath, every shiver of silk amplifying her presence. As she approached the center of the room, the chandeliers catching the sparkle of her eyes, the subtle gasp of the crowd marked the first signs of the storm to come. And just as she reached the spotlight, her hand brushed the envelope in her clutch, the sealed document that contained proof of her new reality, her inheritance, the confirmation of power she had silently cultivated while Lucas remained blind to the transformation. The murmurs crescendoed, whispers sharpened into questions, and for a moment, time seemed suspended, every eye fixed on the woman who had returned not for revenge, but to reclaim her place in a world that had once ignored her. Vivienne Harper took a slow, measured step toward the center of the room, every eye following her movements, the soft glint of sapphire and diamond catching the warm light from the chandeliers above, casting subtle reflections onto the polished marble floor. The memory of Donovan dismissing her during their marriage, of conversations laced with condescension and the subtle undermining of her confidence, flickered through her mind, but she anchored herself in the present, letting those memories fuel a quiet, resolute power. The soft murmur of guests brushing past one another seemed to fall away as she reached the velvet-lined podium, the crowd sensing that something important was about to unfold. Her hands rested lightly on the clutch that contained the document confirming her inheritance, the evidence of a life she had carefully rebuilt while Lucas remained blind to her growth. Julian Montgomery had entrusted her with responsibilities that required intellect, diplomacy, and poise, and through months of strategic engagement and measured decisions, Vivienne had not only met those expectations but exceeded them, crafting a presence that radiated authority and sophistication. Each subtle adjustment of her posture, each deliberate glance across the room, reinforced that she was no longer a spectator in her own story, and the audience instinctively understood that the woman standing before them carried the weight of transformation and unspoken victories. Lucas, sensing the shift, straightened, his confident demeanor faltering as he tried to reconcile the woman he had once known with the formidable presence now commanding the room. Vivienne allowed herself a brief, controlled smile, one that communicated triumph without aggression, authority without malice, a silent message that the power dynamics had irrevocably changed. The orchestral strings in the corner of the ballroom swelled, the notes weaving around the guests, amplifying the tension and the anticipation. Every footstep of Vivienne across the room met with a collective intake of breath. She allowed her gaze to linger on familiar faces, friends and former acquaintances, noting the surprise, the admiration, and the quiet envy. Each reaction a reflection of the transformation she had quietly engineered. Every detail of the room, the polished mahogany of the bar, the crystal chandeliers, the glimmering glassware, became part of the stage upon which Vivienne demonstrated the culmination of her perseverance. As she reached the front of the gathering, the envelope shifted slightly in her clutch, the weight of it a tangible reminder of the new reality she embodied, the sole heiress to an empire built by trust, strategy, and unwavering dedication. The air seemed to thicken, the chatter dimming to a low hum as all eyes fixed on her. Lucas frozen in the midst of attempted conversation, the realization dawning that the woman he underestimated had quietly become the architect of her own destiny. And the question lingering in the room was unspoken but undeniable. What would be her next move? And how would the night unfold as she reclaimed the space he had once occupied with arrogance and certainty? Vivienne Harper took a final, measured step toward the front of the St. Regis ballroom, the polished marble beneath her heels reflecting the glow of the crystal chandeliers, a subtle shimmer that matched the quiet confidence radiating from her. Lucas Donovan remained frozen, a trace of disbelief shadowing his precise features as the crowd fell into a captivated hush, the low murmur of conversations fading into anticipation. Every gaze in the room seemed to follow Vivienne as she opened the envelope in her hands with deliberate care, the soft rustle of paper carrying a weight that transcended sound, the documents within confirming her status as sole heiress of Julian Montgomery's empire. She allowed her eyes to sweep the audience, noting the reactions, astonishment, admiration, and an unspoken respect that had not existed before. Lucas's lips parted slightly, a silent acknowledgment of the shift he could not reverse. The woman he had underestimated standing taller, her posture impeccable, the sapphire silk of her gown clinging in a way that emphasized not just elegance, but the authority she now commanded. Vivienne lifted her head, her gaze meeting his with calm finality, conveying more in a single glance than any words could capture, the years of quiet perseverance and calculated strategy distilled into a moment of undeniable presence. The hum of the ballroom rose again, this time tinged with awe as attendees processed the revelation, every detail, the soft gleam of her emerald necklace, the confident tilt of her chin, the steady rhythm of her steps, underscoring the transformation from past vulnerability to present mastery. The subtle orchestration of the event, from the gleaming chandeliers to the carefully curated reflections of light across the polished surfaces, seemed to accentuate her emergence, framing Vivienne as both figure and force, a symbol of patience, resilience, and intellect realized. Lucas's eyes betrayed a flicker of regret, a recognition of opportunities squandered, and the room absorbed the tension, the silent narrative unfolding before them. She had reclaimed not only the attention of the crowd, but the authority and narrative that had been denied her for years. Vivienne allowed a small, composed smile to cross her lips, one that spoke of triumph without bitterness, justice without malice, of victory rendered in grace, poise, and undeniable merit. As she turned slowly, allowing the room to fully acknowledge the magnitude of her presence, she stepped back toward the balcony overlooking the city lights, the golden glow illuminating the resolute lines of her expression, leaving an open question lingering in the air, a cinematic pause that promised further revelations and consequences beyond the gaze of the crowd. A story still unfolding as Vivienne Harper embodied the perfect synthesis of intellect, patience, and power, the subtle crescendo of anticipation hanging in the warm, elegant air, drawing every observer into the gravity of a transformation both complete and infinitely compelling. Vivienne Harper stepped toward the balcony doors, the soft murmur of the stunned crowd following her like a distant echo, each eye in the room fixed on her with a mixture of awe and curiosity. The cool evening air drifting through the open doors carried the faint scent of rain-soaked city streets, grounding her in the reality she had so meticulously reconstructed. Every detail of her appearance had been carefully considered, the sapphire silk gown flowing gracefully around her, the subtle shimmer of her emerald necklace catching the chandelier light, the precise tilt of her head that conveyed command without arrogance. Lucas Donovan remained rooted in place, his usual composure fraying as he processed the undeniable shift in power and presence before him. Vivienne allowed herself a calm, measured glance toward the other guests, noting the discreet exchanges of whispers, the fleeting looks of admiration, and the restrained astonishment that radiated through the room. Julian Montgomery, standing a few steps behind her, offered a nod that was at once encouraging and affirming, a silent acknowledgment of the trust and respect that had grown between them over the past months. Vivienne's breath remained steady, each inhale a quiet reminder of the years of careful planning, resilience, and patience that had brought her to this moment. The chandeliers above cast a warm glow across the marble floors, reflecting in the polished surfaces of the room, while the faint strains of orchestral music added a layer of tension and drama that heightened the anticipation. Guests began to lean slightly forward, as if drawn to the magnetic presence Vivienne exuded, sensing that the unfolding events would not only define the night, but also reshape the dynamics of influence and respect within the circle. Lucas's expression betrayed a mixture of disbelief and reluctant recognition, the woman he had once dismissed now embodying authority, grace, and calculated control, a force he could neither ignore nor challenge openly. Vivienne allowed her gaze to sweep over the room once more, absorbing the subtle nods, the quiet gasps, the admiration in eyes that had once overlooked her, feeling the tangible shift in energy as the realization of her achievements settled into the consciousness of those present. The envelope in her hand rested lightly against her side, the weight of its contents both literal and symbolic, the confirmation of her status as the sole heiress, a testament to her ability to navigate past challenges with intelligence and poise. She let a small, composed smile curve her lips, a quiet declaration of victory that needed no words, the resonance of her presence and accomplishments speaking louder than any verbal assertion. As the room held its collective breath, Vivienne Harper turned slowly, her movements deliberate and unhurried, leaving the guests to absorb the magnitude of her presence and the story of triumph that had silently, yet irrevocably, unfolded before them, a narrative of resilience, strategy, and understated power that would linger in their memories long after the evening ended. Vivienne Harper paused at the edge of the balcony, the cool night air brushing against her skin as the city lights stretched endlessly below, a tapestry of gold and amber twinkling like distant stars. Inside the ballroom, the whispers had grown into a low, captivated murmur, the guests leaning subtly forward in their chairs, unable to look away from the commanding presence she exuded. Lucas Donovan's eyes tracked her every movement, a mixture of disbelief, frustration, and reluctant admiration flickering across his carefully maintained composure. Vivienne's hand rested lightly on the envelope at her side, the symbol of authority and recognition that had been hard-won through years of quiet diligence, strategic choices, and unwavering self-belief. The soft clink of crystal glasses, the distant echo of laughter, and the gentle hum of conversation formed a backdrop to the silent assertion of power that radiated from her, a presence that demanded attention without a single word raised. Julian Montgomery stood discreetly nearby, a reassuring anchor, his calm acknowledgment of her triumph adding a layer of unspoken validation to the room. Vivienne's gaze swept over familiar faces, noting subtle shifts in posture, fleeting glances of surprise, and the quiet respect that now accompanied their astonishment. Each movement she made was deliberate, measured, and imbued with the confidence of someone who had overcome past disregard and emerged stronger, a master of her own destiny. The satin of her gown flowed effortlessly with her steps, catching the soft glow of the chandeliers and amplifying the sense of elegance and authority she carried. Lucas's jaw tightened imperceptibly, the realization dawning that the woman before him was not the same one he had once underestimated. The quiet, unassuming partner he had dismissed had become a figure of undeniable presence and influence. Vivienne allowed herself a small, serene smile, the kind that conveyed victory and fulfillment without arrogance, a silent assertion that she had reclaimed not just attention, but the respect and acknowledgment she had long been denied. The guests shifted subtly, their collective attention fixed on her, the room itself seeming to bend toward her presence. The chandeliers, the polished floors, and the subtle orchestral swell blending into a cinematic backdrop for her emergence. Each breath she took, each glance she offered, reinforced the power of her transformation, the years of patience, strategy, and resilience distilled into a single, graceful embodiment of authority. As she moved toward the center of the balcony, the envelope's weight, a comforting reminder of the tangible achievements it represented, the murmurs of the crowd formed a chorus of recognition and astonishment. Vivienne Harper's presence, composed and deliberate, left an indelible mark on the room, a visual narrative of triumph, intelligence, and quiet power that resonated beyond the walls of the St. Regis, promising a future of continued influence and commanding respect from those who had once doubted her. Vivienne Harper felt the gentle press of the evening breeze as it brushed through the open balcony doors, carrying with it the distant hum of traffic and the faint scent of blooming jasmine from the gardens below, a subtle reminder of the world continuing beyond the grandeur of the St. Regis ballroom. Inside, the room remained suspended in a delicate tension, every guest aware of her presence, every whisper of silk or movement of heels amplifying the gravity she now commanded. Donovan shifted subtly in place, the earlier traces of disbelief giving way to a dawning recognition that the woman before him had transformed every ounce of past neglect into a poised, calculated strength he could neither challenge nor ignore. Vivienne's gaze drifted over the ornate detailing of the ballroom, the chandeliers dripping crystal light onto polished floors, the mirrored surfaces reflecting the elegance she embodied, each element of the room reinforcing her silent assertion of authority. She adjusted the clutch at her side, the envelope within a tangible representation of the power she had quietly cultivated, and with each step she took, the rhythm of her movement seemed to echo through the room, a symphony of patience, strategy, and refined control. Julian Montgomery stood discreetly behind her, a quiet pillar of support, his subtle nod conveying the trust, respect, and shared understanding that had allowed her to ascend to this position. Vivienne's eyes scanned the faces of former acquaintances and colleagues, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the widened eyes, the slight gasps of realization as the room absorbed the full measure of her transformation. The murmurs softened, tension lingering in the air like a held breath, as the audience processed the implications of her presence, the delicate balance of elegance and authority she had mastered. Lucas's expression was taut, the carefully maintained mask of composure beginning to falter under the weight of acknowledgment, the recognition that his former judgments had underestimated the depth of her resolve. Vivienne allowed a faint, composed smile to settle, a quiet assertion of accomplishment, a confirmation of the years of meticulous effort and self-reinvention that had led to this moment. The music from the corner orchestra shifted subtly, a gentle swell that accentuated her presence, the polished marble underfoot reflecting both light and the subtle power she now radiated. Each breath she took, each glance she offered, reinforced the shift in perception among the crowd, a collective acknowledgment of her unwavering determination, her intelligence, and the authority she now carried effortlessly. As Vivienne turned slowly toward the grand windows overlooking the city skyline, the glow of distant lights mirrored the quiet triumph in her expression, the envelope at her side a testament to her success. Her journey from silent dismissal to fully realized empowerment resonating through every observer in the room, leaving an unspoken question hanging in the elegant air. What would the next chapter of her story reveal? And how would the evening continue to unfold in the wake of her quiet yet undeniable reclamation of presence, dignity, and control? Vivienne Harper allowed herself a measured pause near the edge of the balcony, the cool breeze from the open doors gently shifting the folds of her sapphire silk gown as the city lights twinkled like distant stars below. Inside, the atmosphere remained charged, every whisper and soft murmur carrying a mixture of curiosity and awe, the guests collectively holding their attention on her without conscious effort. Lucas Donovan's expression tightened as he observed her calm, commanding presence, the calculated grace in every movement, the subtle confidence in the tilt of her chin, and the way her gaze swept across the room with quiet authority. The envelope in her hand, a symbol of both achievement and recognition, rested lightly against her side, its contents a testament to her perseverance, intelligence, and strategic patience. Julian Montgomery, standing slightly behind, offered a subtle nod of affirmation, his understated presence reinforcing the silent support that had guided Vivienne through months of careful navigation and planning. Each guest seemed to sense the shift in energy, leaning slightly forward in their seats, caught between admiration and disbelief, their glances reflecting the awe of someone witnessing a masterful reclaiming of agency. Vivienne's footsteps across the polished marble echoed softly, the subtle click of her heels blending with the delicate orchestral strains that now filled the room, the music accentuating her presence without overshadowing the gravity of the moment. The chandeliers above reflected in the polished surfaces, casting a warm glow that enhanced the elegance she embodied, emphasizing the transformation from the woman who had once been overlooked to the one commanding respect and attention effortlessly. Lucas's eyes revealed a quiet recognition of his underestimation, a realization that the past he had dismissed had been cultivated into a poised, formidable presence, a force that could not be diminished by his previous arrogance. Vivienne allowed a composed, serene smile to grace her lips, an assertion of achievement rendered in elegance, calm, and measured authority, resonating with each observer without the need for verbal declaration. Her gaze traveled the room, noting subtle shifts in posture, widened eyes, and hushed exchanges among the guests, each a reflection of their perception of her unspoken influence. The orchestra swelled slightly, the notes weaving through the space as if underscoring the narrative of transformation, patience, and quiet triumph that Vivienne embodied. As she turned toward the balcony, the glow from the city lights mirrored the internal glow of accomplishment, the envelope remaining a tangible reminder of the power she had earned and the narrative she had reclaimed. The audience absorbed the scene, the weight of the room bending subtly toward her presence, leaving a suspended tension and an unspoken question lingering in the warm, elegant air. What new course would she chart from this point? And how would her quiet yet undeniable authority shape the next unfolding chapter of her story? Vivienne Harper let her gaze drift toward the far corners of the ballroom, where the soft murmur of conversations had grown into a hushed reverence, the guests fully absorbing the presence she commanded. The chandeliers overhead reflected in the polished marble floor, each glimmering crystal catching the light and emphasizing the elegance and authority she now embodied. Lucas Donovan remained at the center of his group, the confidence he had carried so effortlessly now tempered with the realization that the woman before him had transformed beyond recognition, her quiet strength and calculated poise evident in every movement. Vivienne's hand brushed lightly against the envelope at her side, a tangible reminder of the careful planning and strategic patience that had led her to this moment, the culmination of years of determination and resilience. Julian Montgomery's steady presence behind her added a subtle reassurance, his understated acknowledgment of her accomplishment reinforcing the quiet power she projected. She took a deliberate step toward the center of the balcony, the soft click of her heels echoing across the polished floors, the sound merging with the faint orchestral strains that now wove through the room, accentuating the tension and anticipation. Each glance she offered to the guests conveyed not only grace but authority, her eyes scanning familiar faces and noting the subtle shifts in posture, the slight widening of eyes, the restrained gasps of surprise as they recognized the full measure of her transformation. Lucas's expression betrayed a mix of disbelief and reluctant acknowledgment, a silent recognition of the intelligence, patience, and poise that had propelled Vivienne into this position of undeniable presence. The warmth of the chandelier light accentuated the smooth folds of her gown and the shimmer of her emerald necklace, elements that underscored the elegance with which she had reclaimed her narrative. Guests remained poised in their seats, leaning slightly forward as if drawn by an invisible force, each movement and expression reflecting the gravity of the moment and the subtle assertion of control Vivienne maintained without a word. The orchestra swelled gently, the notes threading through the room as a backdrop to her silent dominance, heightening the sense of drama without intruding on the quiet, measured authority she exuded. As Vivienne turned slowly, allowing the light from the city skyline to illuminate her profile, the crowd's attention remained fixed, their collective curiosity and awe creating a suspended tension that underscored the transformation from past dismissal to present command. The envelope in her clutch, the weight of its contents, and the confident rhythm of her steps conveyed a story of perseverance and accomplishment that resonated silently throughout the room. Every breath, every measured movement, and every subtle glance communicated the quiet but absolute reclamation of presence, leaving the guests to wonder what the next chapter of her unfolding narrative would reveal and how the evening might continue to honor the silent power she now embodied. Vivienne Harper allowed a calm, deliberate sweep of her gaze across the room, noting the subtle shift in atmosphere as guests leaned in, curiosity and admiration mingling in their expressions. The soft hum of conversation dimmed further, the orchestra adjusting its tempo to the quiet tension she exuded, the polished marble floors reflecting both the chandeliers and the presence she now commanded. Lucas. Donovan remained rigid in the center of his circle, his composure strained under the weight of recognition. The woman he had dismissed transformed into an unmistakable figure of influence and authority. Vivienne's hand lightly rested on the envelope at her side, the proof of her meticulously orchestrated ascent, a symbol of intellect, strategy, and unshakable patience. Julian Montgomery's quiet support from behind reinforced her confidence, his subtle nod signaling approval and acknowledgment of the calculated path she had followed to this moment. Every measured step she took carried the rhythm of intention, the soft click of heels across the marble merging with the subdued notes of the orchestra, amplifying her presence without a single word spoken. Guests turned slightly, drawn to the elegance, poise, and authority that radiated from Vivienne, the intricate folds of her sapphire gown and the shimmer of her emerald necklace accentuating her aura of sophistication. Lucas's expression betrayed the realization that he could no longer define the narrative, that the quiet strength and composure she had cultivated were beyond the reach of dismissal or critique. Vivienne allowed a serene, confident smile to settle across her face, a declaration of accomplishment and control rendered entirely through posture, gaze, and the subtle grace of movement. The room absorbed her narrative silently, the subtle exchanges of glances, the gentle shifts in posture, and the hushed murmur of astonishment, all affirming her reclaimed authority. The light from the chandeliers and the city skyline beyond the balcony danced across her features, highlighting the transformation from the woman once underestimated to one who now commanded respect effortlessly. Each breath, each glance, and each step reinforced the assertion of self-possession and triumph, leaving an impression that resonated through the room without the need for any verbal proclamation. As Vivienne moved toward the center of the balcony, allowing the crowd to fully register the gravity of her presence, the envelope in her clutch remained a tangible reminder of the power she had earned. The collective attention of the guests, Lucas included, remained fixed upon her, the silent acknowledgment of her intelligence, poise, and carefully honed authority creating a suspended tension that held the room in rapt focus, a quiet promise of further revelations and the unfolding impact of the transformation she had so deliberately achieved. Vivienne Harper felt the weight of every gaze upon her as she moved gracefully toward the center of the balcony, the soft hum of the orchestra blending seamlessly with the subtle murmur of the room, creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation. The chandeliers above reflected brilliantly on the polished marble floor, the crystals capturing the light and casting fractured glimmers across the faces of the captivated audience, all of whom were silently acknowledging the transformation and authority she now radiated. Lucas Donovan, standing near the far end of the room, adjusted his posture slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face as he took in the full measure of Vivienne's presence, the elegance and composure she carried without effort, each movement deliberate and commanding. The envelope in her hand remained a tangible symbol of the power she had painstakingly cultivated, a quiet testament to her intelligence, patience, and perseverance. Julian Montgomery's calm presence behind her offered reassurance, a subtle nod affirming the strategic steps Vivienne had taken to reach this pivotal moment, reinforcing her confidence as she navigated the space with impeccable poise. Guests shifted imperceptibly in their seats, leaning forward, eyes widening, and whispers passing quietly as they absorbed the quiet authority and unmistakable dignity Vivienne embodied, the soft rustle of her gown accompanying her measured steps across the marble expanse. Her gaze scanned the room with precise awareness, noting the subtle reactions of friends, colleagues, and acquaintances alike, each recognizing the remarkable journey from being underestimated to standing as a figure of undeniable influence. Lucas's expression betrayed his internal reckoning, the acknowledgment that the woman he had once dismissed had cultivated a presence that could not be diminished or ignored. Vivienne allowed a composed smile to grace her lips, an expression of fulfillment and controlled triumph that communicated confidence and success without a single word. The delicate interplay of light from the chandeliers and the soft strains of the orchestra heightened the drama, accentuating her transformation and the subtle power she now wielded effortlessly. Every breath she took, every glance cast across the room, reinforced the narrative of resilience, strategy, and authority, her presence a living demonstration of the careful planning and self-possession she had honed over the years. As she paused near the balcony railing, the city skyline beyond shimmering with golden lights, the collective attention of the room remained fixed upon her, the unspoken understanding of her achieved status, intelligence, and poised command permeating the space. The envelope rested lightly in her clutch, a physical reminder of the accomplishments and recognition she had earned, each subtle movement and careful step conveying a story of determination and measured authority. Vivienne Harper's presence, composed yet magnetic, left the audience suspended in admiration, the room seemingly holding its breath as the elegance, intellect, and quiet power she embodied hinted at further developments yet to unfold, a poised anticipation for the chapters of influence and mastery still to come. Vivienne Harper stood poised near the balcony railing, the soft evening breeze carrying the distant hum of the city streets below, the lights flickering like a constellation of gold and amber. Inside the St. Regis ballroom, the hum of conversation had diminished to a reverent silence, the guests fully absorbed by the presence she commanded. Donovan remained rooted in place, his expression a mixture of disbelief and reluctant acknowledgment, the transformation of Vivienne from the woman he had underestimated to a figure of undeniable authority striking him with clarity. The envelope in her hand rested lightly against her side, a symbol of the careful strategy, intelligence, and perseverance that had brought her to this defining moment. Julian Montgomery's quiet presence behind her offered subtle reinforcement, a nod of affirmation and respect that underscored the deliberate planning and patience that had led to this night. Each step Vivienne took across the marble floor was measured and deliberate, the soft click of her heels harmonizing with the gentle swell of the orchestra, the sound echoing through the room with understated authority. The crystal chandeliers above reflected off the polished surfaces, scattering light across the room and highlighting the elegance and composure she now radiated, her sapphire gown and emerald necklace adding to the sense of refined power. Guests shifted imperceptibly, leaning forward with quiet fascination, their expressions a mixture of awe, respect, and surprise as they absorbed the full measure of her presence. Lucas's eyes revealed a dawning comprehension that the woman before him had transformed every slight, every dismissal, and every overlooked opportunity into an assertion of grace, intelligence, and influence. Vivienne allowed a composed, serene smile to grace her lips, an assertion of quiet triumph rendered entirely through poise, gaze, and controlled movement, communicating her authority without the need for words. The subtle tension in the room was reinforced by the orchestral notes, the polished marble, and the soft reflections of light, creating a cinematic backdrop for her silent dominance and carefully earned presence. Her gaze moved across the faces in the crowd, noting subtle reactions, fleeting expressions of surprise and admiration, the restrained exchanges confirming that her carefully orchestrated emergence had shifted the dynamics of the evening entirely. Every breath, every glance, and every deliberate movement reinforced her reclamation of narrative, authority, and recognition, leaving a tangible impression on the room. As Vivienne adjusted the envelope slightly in her clutch, the weight a quiet reminder of her achievements, she allowed her eyes to linger on Lucas, the subtle spark of realization and respect mirrored in his expression. The room collectively absorbed the moment, the soft hum of anticipation returning as every guest recognized that Vivienne Harper's presence, composed and commanding, had permanently altered the perception of her role, her strength, and her influence, leaving the evening suspended on the promise of what she would accomplish next. Vivienne Harper allowed a slow, deliberate exhale as she stepped further into the warm glow of the ballroom lights, the polished marble beneath her heels reflecting the soft radiance of crystal chandeliers and the expectant faces of the guests. The soft hum of whispered conversations had quieted into a respectful murmur, the air thick with the silent acknowledgment of her presence and the transformation she embodied. Lucas Donovan remained rooted in place, his earlier confidence replaced by a subtle tension, the recognition dawning that the woman before him was no longer the figure he had once underestimated, but a poised, commanding presence whose authority could not be denied. Vivienne's hand brushed lightly against the envelope she carried, a tangible reminder of the patience, strategy, and intellect that had brought her to this pivotal moment, a symbol of carefully earned triumph and recognition. Julian Montgomery stood just behind her, an unspoken support, his subtle nod reinforcing the quiet power and assurance Vivienne radiated. Each step she took across the marble floor was measured, a rhythmic cadence that resonated through the room without words, the soft click of her heels harmonizing with the faint orchestral strains that underscored the elegance, dignity, and authority she embodied. Guests shifted subtly in their seats, leaning in ever so slightly, their expressions reflecting a mixture of awe, admiration, and the undeniable realization that they were witnessing a figure who had transformed every slight, every dismissal, and every overlooked opportunity into quiet mastery and influence. Vivienne's eyes scanned the room, noting the subtle gasps, the fleeting expressions of surprise and respect, the acknowledgment and glances exchanged among attendees who recognized the precision of her ascendance. Lucas's gaze flickered with both surprise and reluctant respect, an internal acknowledgment of the quiet strength and deliberate control that now defined Vivienne's presence. The light from the chandeliers danced across her sapphire gown and the shimmer of her emerald necklace, enhancing the visual impression of elegance, grace, and power. Every breath she drew, every subtle motion, communicated mastery and confidence, the unspoken declaration of authority filling the space more profoundly than any spoken word could. The orchestral swell, the polished floors, and the reflective surfaces of the room served as a stage upon which her silent command was accentuated, each element working in harmony with her poised movements to convey triumph achieved through resilience, intelligence, and careful planning. As she paused to adjust the envelope in her clutch, the crowd collectively absorbed the significance of her presence, the anticipation of what she might do next hanging in the air like a delicate chord unresolved. Vivienne Harper's serene, composed smile and the quiet authority of her stance left an indelible impression, a suspended moment that spoke volumes about the power she had reclaimed and the elegance with which she had done so, leaving every observer captivated by the mastery, poise, and deliberate force she now exuded. Vivienne Harper stepped back from the balcony, the city lights shimmering like distant jewels below, casting a subtle glow over the polished marble floors of the St. Regis ballroom. The room remained suspended in a hush, every guest captivated, their attention drawn entirely to the quiet authority she embodied. Lucas Donovan shifted slightly, the realization of her complete transformation settling across his features, a mix of awe and disbelief reflected in his eyes. The envelope in her hand, now held with effortless ease, symbolized the culmination of years of strategic patience, intelligence, and perseverance, each decision, each calculated move now bearing tangible weight and recognition. Julian Montgomery, standing with a composed assurance just behind her, offered a small nod, a subtle reinforcement of the trust and collaboration that had guided Vivienne to this defining moment. Every movement she made was deliberate, each step across the polished floors resonating with a quiet power, the gentle click of her heels merging seamlessly with the subdued orchestral strains that heightened the sense of anticipation in the room. Guests leaned in subtly, eyes widening, whispers held in suspended tension as they registered the full measure of her transformation, the quiet reclamation of authority, respect, and influence that radiated from her without a single spoken word. The chandeliers above reflected brilliantly, their crystal light bouncing across her sapphire gown and the emerald shimmer of her necklace, accentuating elegance and command in equal measure. Lucas's posture remained rigid, a silent acknowledgment of the depth of her accomplishment, the realization that the years of disregard he had once imposed had been converted into a refined, unassailable strength. Vivienne allowed a composed smile to touch her lips, serene and assured, a subtle yet unmistakable sign of triumph achieved with grace, dignity, and calculated precision. The room absorbed every motion, every glance, the subtle tension mingling with awe and admiration, the collective recognition of her achieved power forming an almost tangible presence. Each breath, each controlled gesture, reinforced the narrative of resilience, deliberate strategy, and personal mastery that Vivienne had cultivated over years of silent determination. As she adjusted the envelope in her clutch, the soft rustle of paper punctuating the otherwise hushed room, the observers sensed the quiet dominance she now held, the unspoken assurance that she had reclaimed not just attention, but the narrative, influence, and respect that had long been denied. The orchestra swelled gently, the notes weaving an elegant backdrop to her poised movements, the reflective surfaces and warm light emphasizing the cinematic tension and dramatic closure of the evening. Vivienne Harper's presence, calm yet commanding, left a lasting impression on every witness, the suspended anticipation in the air hinting at further developments and the promise of future chapters defined by intelligence, strategy, and unwavering authority, the story of her triumph lingering in the hearts and minds of all who had watched it unfold.